This WiLLcast was with Jake and Brian from Wisconsin Lighting Lab. This was really focused around the engineering support that WiLL provides for sports lighting applications. Sports lighting applications are quite a bit different than other commercial and industrial projects we work on. There's a lot of front-end engineering support and a lot of post-sale engineering support, and we went through a recent project here in the Midwest and talked about some of the controls commissioning that we did and other post-sale support to really get the customer up to speed, and how Wisconsin Lighting Lab kind of sets itself apart from other competitors.
Definitely, and I think it was fun. Jake and Brian are two of the unsung heroes of WiLL. I know they've both been featured on. I know Brian once. Jake's been on a couple WiLLcasts, but it's always fun to have some of the team here that people maybe never meet or they only talk to on the phone and actually get them in front of the camera because they're really the people that make the magic happen behind the scenes and help take projects the last mile.
Very true.
Once it's on site, and we talk about it more, but there were things that came up with this project that we had never run into before, and you couldn't predict some of the stuff with the wireless controls and the connectivity and things like that. We can't predict those site-induced issues.
For sure.
So hearing their side is really cool.
And they're really great representations of our engineering team and our engineering support and how we like to really dive in deep on these projects with our customers. And regardless of the channel that the job comes through, it could be our direct channel, it could be our strategic channel. These are the people that are there really every step of the way. So also, big shout out to these guys. As Becca said, they are in the background solving a lot of these problems, and it's just great to see all the offerings that WiLL has on the sports side, and all the solutions that we can tailor specifically to the project. This WiLLcast is brought to you by WiLL Sport. WiLL Sport is Wisconsin Lighting Lab's sports lighting brand. We have a bunch of different products within WiLL Sport. We have our HSX sports lighter, which is a more traditional sports lighting fixture. Looks the part. It's the shape and the design that everybody associates with sports lighting.
Great for retrofit applications.
Yes.
Which some of our competitors don't do, so it's good to note that we will take existing poles and look at the brackets and arms and things like that and see what we can do in just replacing the light fixtures.
Yeah, and if you want to do a partial field and you want to maintain the look of the field, if you want to do one pole 1 year and one pole the next, you can use the HSX sports lighter and maintain that aesthetic. We've got the GTX, which is common for pickleball courts and tennis complexes. The KBX, of course, which a lot of people are familiar with. That's our high-end product. We can combine that with GFX controls. We've got a lot of cool applications and projects that we're designing right now with that fixture. And we've got some new stuff coming out. We have a HDX fixture, which we've done a few jobs on. Works great for interior projects and can also be combined with our control system. So if you're interested in partnering with Wisconsin Lighting Lab and getting your hands on some WiLL Sport products, go to our website, willbrands.com. Otherwise, give us a call and enjoy this WiLLcast with Jake and Brian. Well, given all the wireless control projects that we're doing for sports applications, I thought it'd be a good idea to get together and talk about some of the awesome things about the system and some of the services from an engineering standpoint that we provide to help customers through their application. I guess, Brian, what is that device? Good place to jump in.
Yeah. It's a RF spectrum analyzer.
Yep.
But it's a nice little handheld unit. More often when you see these, it's like a giant,
Can I see it?
$500,000 like benchtop piece of equipment. That's kind of an open source.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
Is it a big battery? It just goes through a lot of power?
So the whole enclosure, even the buttons are made out of cast
aluminum
metal. I actually don't. It's probably non-ferrous, but
okay.
But yeah, that's why it's so heavy. And I assume that's to sort of mitigate interference, since it's a really sensitive piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So
well, it's funny how sports lighting has evolved from just bringing a foot candle meter out to an application to now having an RF analyzer or explorer. It's what is so with wireless control systems, Jake, from an application engineering standpoint, what are some of the obvious advantages of the WiLLsport GFX system? Why do so many people want to use this system on their applications?
Yeah, the biggest thing is the flexibility. A lot of the times when you're working with wireless systems, they have to be hooked into another network, maybe a network at like a school or something like that. And you have to get IT people involved. You have to have firewalls that are brought down or allowed to pass through. This system is completely on its own. It's its own system. It's secure, obviously. People from the outside world can't get in. But it's also, most importantly to me at least, is it's just flexible. It can go anywhere. There's weatherproof enclosures. You can put it outside if you had to, lock the box, obviously. But it can go outside. It can go in buildings. It can go in press boxes. It can be used on literally any type of application. That's probably the best selling point with it. Outside of just the functionality. The functionality is obviously very slick as well, but that's for me at least, that's the biggest advantage.
So functionality ranges from super fast halftime light shows, like professional level stuff, to RGB color changing. You've even designed some sound effects into the system. Mm-hmm. But if you kind of had to 80-20 all the features and the benefits, let's do features that the system offers, what do you see customers going with, Brian?
So far,
like the gymnasium project, I think is a good example. They went, there was no color changing LEDs on that one, but that was a schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Scheduling is an important feature for everybody.
Yeah.
Especially, when energy conservation is important, especially when like athletes, like the users of the field, are given permission to control the lighting system. They may not, remember to turn the lights off when they're done with a practice or whatnot. So it's nice to have the scheduling built in to shut the lights off automatically when the customer wants it.
Yeah, so we have a default schedule. A lot of we kind of specialize in the non-professional fields, kind of the mass market sports lighting applications, where oftentimes there are no facilities managers. You have volunteers or coaches, maybe somebody at the school, somebody like a Friday Night Lights type situation where there's somebody in charge during football season. But generally speaking, we try and set that schedule at the factory, commission it at the factory, and we've seen a lot of positive feedback on people using the facility a lot more than they thought. So, extending hours into the night, kids in the community that are able to use it. So the scheduling is huge. The entertainment features are huge. Jake, you mentioned ease of install. Mm-hmm. We hear that a lot. Some competing systems, you have to run actual, wired connections and things to run the entertainment controls. So huge, amount of benefits to the system. And I think the reason it works is because we offer support to take it from a 90% solution from the factory and then dial it in for the customer once it's on site. And we have a really good example of a project here in the Midwest where they more or less got all the bells and the whistles in the system, RGB, entertainment, scheduling, but we had to work with them once the system was installed to work around some RF or radio frequency interference issues. Mm-hmm. So walk me through, I guess, Jake, you were kind of managing a lot of that on the front end. We kind of knew it could be an issue once we got in and we were up front with the customer. It's like, what, there's a big range here, but we're going to be with you every step of the way to work through it. Jake, what did that process look like? Kind of the first half of the project, and then Brian, once we got into troubleshooting mode, what did that look like?
Yeah, so the first half of the project, with all these projects, we take an expanded look at the entire site and what the site's going to end up looking like. We work typically with the customer to at least get a baseline understanding of what their expectations are, as well as where they would like to use the system. The system has user interfaces that can be placed in a variety of areas, but those areas kind of dictate some other things, especially with like the range. Like on this job in particular, the one that you're talking about, is multiple fields. So we knew that there was going to be the potential need for a range extender for the practice field, which is further away. But going into it, we wanted to test the waters a little bit and see how far we could actually get, in which we actually were able. Brian will talk about it. We were actually able to get quite far out. But anyways, so those were the first initial discussions, was just around like where they would like to place the panel, ideally, which in this case was a press box, which is very, very typical. And then outside of that, it's just like, what does the press box look like to make sure that we don't have a ton of interference with the walls of the press box or just other devices in the press box. But those were just like the initial type of conversations that happened. As we got into it more, some other things came up. We had some level of an idea as to what was going to happen with the RF. Just to like get into it right away, there's right on the edge of this field, there's a large water tower and power lines. The water tower has a ton of 5G antennas on it, and when we did our first walk through the job site, we were like, that could be an issue.
I don't think they're 5G, are they?
No, it's
because 5G would have been above the frequency of our, but they're cellular.
Yeah, they are cellular
antennas.
Yeah,
ISM
Anyway.
and GSM.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry,
But anyways, no, yeah, that's a good clarifying point. So the cellular antennas basically could be an issue because they're literally right next to the field.
Yep.
So that was just something that we saw initially. We
Yep.
didn't really think a ton about it at the time. And it was just something that we would kind of have to figure out as the project kind of progressed and installed.
Nice. And then initially the a good chunk of the system was working flawlessly as it was commissioned, and then we started to go into troubleshooting mode a little bit with some of the connections or some of the communications. You had a hunch it was related to some of the cell towers. There was a power line discussion at some point as well, or what?
Yeah.
Once you initially got to the site and we had it installed, what was kind of the exploration process?
Yeah. So, like, just to back up a bit, Jake mentioned the water tower. We knew the water tower, was there. We didn't know that it was covered in antennas, at least, designing the system before actually, visiting the site. And then just adjacent to that water tower are like huge high power transmission lines that must service, a big chunk of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
It was kind of anybody's guess whether or not either of those were going to cause interference with the system. And inevitably that's what we discovered. But the troubleshooting process was, we tried to roll it out in logical steps instead of just taking guesses and shooting from the hip and trying to just, figure it out. The idea here was to learn what was really happening so that, we could take care of issues like this with future jobs quicker.
Yep.
So, the steps here, and I guess it's a good point to mention, perhaps one feature that our system has that isn't necessarily apparent to the customer is just our ability to remotely connect to the system. Like I can do it here from our office if there's issues, whether it's at game time or, during downtime, I can hop in and try to troubleshoot over the phone with the customer. And that's kind of the first steps that I took. Mm-hmm. That way, you've got eyes on the field where I can't necessarily see what's going on. So the next step after that, conveniently, this was, down in Milwaukee. So it's just like an hour drive from our office. So when I first started visiting the site, the first step we did was move the antenna, which would normally be located right on top of the console inside the press box, to outside the press box to try to get better signal through the walls. This press box was just, wood and drywall. It wasn't like brick or anything, which is much more harder for RF to get through. So we did that, and then the next step after that was using some directional antennas to try to focus the signal where it needs to be, instead of an omnidirectional antenna, which is just sort of blasting out signal in a circle. You can sort of take that wasted signal that's not getting used and reflect it, where it needs to go to sort of amplify the signal at the fixtures. The more that we did that, the more it became obvious that it wasn't just a lack of signal strength that was the issue. There was clearly something else that was overpowering the signal, no matter how strong we could make it. So that's where that spectrum analyzer came into play.
Yeah.
So this tool allowed us to scan a range of frequencies and sort of get a visual map, I guess, of what the RF space looks like there. And I used some simple tools, literally just like a sheet of metal, sort of as a reflector. And I'd stand with the water tower right in front of me and just sort of get a baseline of what the interference looks like. And then I use the metal to sort of direct where that interference was coming from, to really confirm that it was coming from the water tower and not from the power lines that are nearby or any other RF source. So once we knew where it was pinpointed, there were two light poles, each with 4 fixtures on that practice field that's adjacent to the water tower where all those antennas are. And what was really interesting about this troubleshooting this problem in particular was how near field the issue was, as in if you get about 150 feet from that tower, which is right about where those 2 poles were located, the interference is it's intense. It's really intense.
So the cell towers were directional, was the signal almost aimed in the direction of the fixtures?
Yeah, they're definitely directional antennas,
Yeah.
and several of them were pointed
Gotcha.
Directly
right at the
overhead.
light fixtures.
Nice.
And what's really interesting, you back up maybe 20 or 30 feet away from those 2 poles, which were in the path of the interference, and the signal looks great. Like all the interference just drops right off. So all the other fixtures on the rest of that practice field were working fine, and those 2 poles, 8 fixtures, were almost inoperable.
Yeah.
So we installed some. What we ended up doing was installing some directional antennas on the receiving end, on the poles themselves, and then we put some metal baffles behind the antenna to block that interference coming from the water tower, and that cleaned everything up. Works great.
Yeah.
Another thing that we didn't mention yet on this project, there was 2 things at play here. So there was this RF interference from the water tower antennas, but there was also a significant obstacle that I don't know if anybody was aware of when we designed the system.
We were aware that it was there, but we weren't aware how big it was, I guess.
Yeah, so they as part of their renovation project, they had installed a massive scoreboard,
Jumbotron.
Like the biggest video board that
Yeah.
you've ever seen.
I mean, it is impressive. It's a beautiful scoreboard, but it's basically a gigantic metal wall, and it was completely blocking the signal source to a couple poles.
It's a giant version of what we ended up installing on the fixture.
Yeah,
That totally
basically.
is.
So there's no way to get through it, so
Yeah.
you got to go around it.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing to fix that problem was installing a repeater on one of the poles adjacent to the practice field that had good clear line of sight to the transmitter, and then it can relay the signal over to those poles that are behind the scoreboard.
When I hear you guys talk about this, it just stresses the importance of factory support and people that understand the products, where when this stuff comes up, they can be there to support it. And Jake, you know this very well, but in the lighting industry, oftentimes you have 5-6 different product companies to put together what we just described. You have a light pole company, you have a light fixture company, you have a controls company, you have an installer that's sourcing surge suppression, fuses, all their electrical equipment. And what we've tried to do over time is just continue to invest and being as vertically integrated as possible so we can work through this stuff. Because when your team is designing a new application, even if you guys have perfect information on where these obstructions are, locations, you're only ever going to get maybe 70-80% of the way.
Yeah, if that.
There's outdated Google renderings.
Yeah.
We don't always have access to the contractor, so it's just,
or there's not a contractor,
or
they
haven't even
assigned
been selected
yet.
Yeah. If it's being specified in the early stage, if there's an engineer in charge of running the project for an owner, the job might not go for several years. Mm-hmm. And just think of all the things that can change in an area. The antennas that were not there when the job was initially designed, when it goes to get installed, who knows what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it's cool that that we have these resources available for our sales partners and for our customers. But anything, I guess, Jake, on the topic and other controls jobs that we've done recently. What are some of the other kind of value adds that you see our controls team providing on a routine basis?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, Brian already talked about this a little bit, but it's just the ability for us to continue to provide support after it's installed. Typically, we're not working directly with the end user. We're working with an engineer, or sales rep, whoever it is, contractor in some cases. But once the end user gets it in their hands and starts really diving into the system, they start to form their own opinions of what they want, and that can differ a lot from an engineer that specifies it on the front end.
That is a great point. And it's not to get the questionnaire filled out during the engineering process. It's just not even possible. So you need to have flexibility on the back end.
We have, and obviously we have some flexibility to kind of help the end user. Not too long ago, we had a project at a college out east, and for whatever reason, our standard on the scheduling controls page is, I believe it's sunset to sundown is the typical timer that you can set if you just want to set a generic timer. But they wanted that to stay on till 2 a.m. or midnight. I forget exactly what it was, but maybe it was midnight. And that was just one easy thing that we can change to kind of help the end user out, basically. It's not a complete must for them. Obviously, they don't need the lights on till midnight or 2 a.m., whatever it ended up being. But it's just one of those value add things that they have the confidence in us that they can reach out to us, or they can reach out to their engineer, and the engineer can reach out to us, and we can solve a simple issue if it comes up. So that's one of the nice things that, especially working with Brian, that we've been able to do on a lot of projects, is just kind of solve things on the fly if we need to. Obviously, again, we want to get as much information on the front end and solve for as much as we can on the front end, but there's always things that come up on the back end, and that's essentially what we're here for too. We want to make sure the project is that project goes smoothly with the end user. So
and the customers can have I think it's fun for the customers to know that the product that they bought isn't just set it and forget it. It is what it is.
It's not off the shelf. It's customized to kind of what they want to a little bit, and they really like that, especially with this type of thing.
And the whole idea behind this product is to entertain spectators and enjoy the sport more and things like that. So when we're adding in sound effects and music and light shows, if a customer wants a particular song, if they've got their fight song for their school, or they want specific colors on the field that they can just tap a button and have that set up, we can do it after the fact.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, after this summer of going through a lot of these installs with the GFX system, I've personally learned a lot, and I've also really learned to appreciate Brian and his team, our controls team. this system that they've
Appreciate you
developed,
too,
this system that they've
The
developed
respect is mutual.
I've been appreciating Brian for way longer than this summer, so shame
Well,
on
you guys used to share an office together.
Yeah, we were
true.
best buds. Our best buds. Sorry.
This year,
No, but this system that they've developed is pretty impressive, and it checks so many boxes, and even some that people don't even know that they wanted, and it's able to do a lot of things. That are pretty cool.
the kind of from a little different angle, the amount of value it can extract out of the customer's investment for a marginal increase in cost is, it goes from having a cool, like awesome, well lit sports venue to an entertainment venue that is typically reserved for professional stadiums and people with much larger budgets. So just to add an extra few percent to the overall project costs, and an already huge project cost, just to tack on some of this stuff and just provide more value for the customer. That's really the goal for the Will Sport line. And we have so many installs here in Fond du Lac County now with this system, and just to see players and fans and coaches and people that were not expecting that in their system, and once they turn it on, there's a touchpad interface to be able to interact with it. I think I think it's really cool, and it's just getting started too. I mean, our data system and our data highway, over time, every single year, as we tack on more functionality, and over time, as we can push additional features to the customer, they're going to have features that they didn't even know they purchased. Yeah, and it's pretty cool. So what else we want to talk about? Any other notable things on recent projects?
Yeah, we've just been playing around a lot with some antenna combinations on some projects. Like I mentioned, we've done a lot of installs this past summer with the system, and we've learned a lot as to how things need to be installed by the contractor to make sure they're in optimal locations to have very good communication.
This is the console primarily?
Yeah, the console, even the control, even the remote driver panels.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the fixtures themselves even.
Yep.
There's just like ways that we've learned pretty quickly to optimize communication. And I say communication, it's not like we're losing any type of communication, but it's just like making sure that things are properly communicating 100% of the time.
Yep.
Turns out that it is a little bit difficult sometimes because just the way that you have some RF interference, maybe one day, and you could take out a couple lights and they could act a little funky for a little while. There's just ways that Brian and I have discovered that we can make sure that contractors are installing it properly so that it's going to work.
Yep.
That's like the biggest thing. And then just continuing to be available for them if they have questions. People sometimes get afraid of control stuff too because they think it's going to be super complex.
And I think rightfully afraid.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of companies out there that do not do control systems right, and they expect the contractor, or expect their sales agency, or expect the customer to suddenly become an expert at this somewhat complicated system. So, we've tried to change that paradigm a little bit where people don't have to be afraid to purchase a control system or sell a control system. Because I know in a lot of cases, some of our sales partners who have been kind of put in a bad position in the past by other factories.
Yeah, controls companies.
They run the other direction when controls, opportunities come up. So, I think we want to continue to solve as much as we can at the factory. If it's like when you buy a new vehicle, you really shouldn't have to set up the touchscreen control system in the vehicle. Why should you have to set up your lighting system? So I think continue to integrate more at the factory, and also just for the customer to get more out of their investment. Continue to make the 100-foot light tower cooler and cooler and cooler, and push more functionality. I think it's going to be a fun few years as some of this development speeds up.
Yeah, it's been, like I said, this summer's been pretty interesting to work through all these different projects.
And such a high percentage of our sports jobs now have control systems.
Right. Yeah, it's actually pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some very large ones that have multiple different control consoles. So there's like systems on systems, and It is very neat. And again, big shout out to our controls team. This is very impressive. I come from a controls engineering background, and I mean, industrial controls in general is a little bit slow moving with their development of things, but stuff like this is super cool. The user interface is super easy to use. Like there's no way a customer can accidentally like confuse something. Like everything's it's very slick. Everything
what's funny?
works.
You just said that. So as you said that, when Brian, you first started developing this, we said it's got to be easy enough for my grandma to use it. And she literally just walked by and waved.
Okay, everyone saw the elderly woman walk by because I was like, it's late on a Thursday,
wow,
man.
that was about as ironic as it gets.
Yeah, and I think it
I would
is
like $1
to
million.
that level.
Yeah, it just starts falling. Nice.
We'll ever test the system after we get off
that's
the
true.
WiLLcast.
That's actually a good idea. I mean, it takes a couple
Well,
minutes
Tyler
to
said
get used to.
his 3-year-old. He says Sonny can
Yeah,
run
but
it.
3-year-olds are amazing at technology.
Yeah,
They're
born in it.
That's true. Well, a couple other things to touch on. I think stating the importance of getting our project engineers and our controls engineers and our product engineers involved in the project as early as possible. 5-minute conversations, 10-minute conversations, 20-minute webinars can save tens of hours on the back end. So
Definitely.
we are very open to supporting specifiers, our lighting agencies, distributors. Get us involved as early as possible. I'm working on a local project here for a racetrack down the street. And it's going to be very, very cool when it's done. But we were able to get in super early, and in between brainstorming and we're talking about control systems and everything else, just the amount of you can just make the project run so much smoother. And I know a lot of factories don't always offer that, but we absolutely do. So get our project engineers involved. We're happy to help. So I just want to state that, and also just say, as Jake said, thanks to Brian and Ryan and Tyler and Jake, your team, and I think we have just a great system developed. It's still day one in my book. When it comes to this control system, there's just so much cool stuff that we'll be able to add to it over time. And again, it comes down to communities and kind of the mass market being able to have professional grade stuff without and being able to afford it. And I think that's really, really cool. And part of that is making it easy. And we know light poles, we know brackets, we know lighting design, we know control systems. We can help with the footing side of the structural side of it. Getting Will involved early it's always a great move.
Definitely.
So thank you very much, guys.